Konnichiwa, I'm Paqupel, your guide to Japanese flavors. Today we're unpacking exactly why Japanese rice bread tastes so delicious and showing you how to recreate it at home, even without Japan's specialty rice flour. Rice bread has been gaining attention in Japan, especially among people mindful of gluten-free, health-conscious eating. Crisp and golden on the outside, moist and fluffy on the inside. It's not simply a substitute for wheat bread. Our Japanese language channel has shared several rice bread recipes, and together they've reached over 1 million views across social media. Rice bread made in Japan typically uses flour specifically developed for baking bread. This flour is difficult to find outside Japan, and even when it is exported, it tends to be quite expensive. So for this video, we tried to recreate that same Japanese rice bread as closely as possible using raw rice instead, something that's much easier to find outside Japan. It won't be a perfect match, but we think we can get remarkably close in both taste and texture. This recipe is also much easier to make than a wheat-based one. It only needs 1 round of fermentation, and since the batter doesn't stick as much, cleanup is a breeze too. In Japan, rice bread is typically made with rice flour using varieties specifically bred for this purpose. Good rice bread flour is said to need 3 things. First, the proportion of amylose in the rice's starch. At 15 to 25%, you get rice bread that's both delicious and well-shaped, just like in Japan. Too much of it and the bread turns out dense and dry. Too little, and while the bread stays moist, it tends to collapse after rising. Second, the amount of damage to the rice's starch. When starch damage is low, the bread rises well, but if it's too damaged, it absorbs too much water and the bread won't rise properly. Third, very fine particles. The finer the particles, the more evenly moisture spreads through the dough, resulting in a finer, more even crumb. Rice flour sold overseas rarely meets all 3 of these conditions. So in this video, to make it easier to recreate outside Japan, we're skipping rice flour altogether. Instead, we'll soak raw rice in water and grind it down, aiming to get as close as possible to that same Japanese rice flour bread. Alright, let's start cooking. Today we're making shokupan, Japanese-style loaf bread. The rice you use matters. Short grain varieties are best, especially Japanese rice varieties. That's because their amylose content sits close to that 15 to 25% sweet spot. Rinse the raw rice. Water quality affects the result too. Most tap water in Japan is soft, which works well for rice bread. It's not that you can't make it with hard water, but if you're aiming for the smoothest texture, soft water is the better choice. Soak it in plenty of water, about 3 to 4 hours in warm weather, or 6 hours in cooler weather. Soaking time matters. Too short and it won't grind smoothly. Too long and it can affect the rice's flavor, and in hot weather it also raises the risk of bacteria. Since the timing depends on your environment and the type of rice, use the grains as your guide. They're ready once they turn slightly white and break easily when pressed with a fingernail. Once soaked, drain the rice well in a colander. If you don't drain it thoroughly, you won't be able to hit the recipe's water measurements. Let it sit for a few minutes to drain naturally. Add the drained rice to a blender along with water, potato starch, sugar, salt, and oil. Potato starch gives it a soft, fluffy texture like wheat bread, but too much makes it heavy. Sugar adds sweetness and helps retain moisture. Salt balances the flavor and also slows fermentation for a finer crumb. Oil softens the crumb and keeps it moist. Blend until the mixture becomes a smooth, creamy paste with no trace of individual grains. Soaking the rice beforehand softens the grains, which absorbs the impact of the blender blades during mixing and helps protect the starch from damage. This same technique is also used in Japan's rice flour production. Blend in short bursts of a few seconds, stopping to scrape down the sides with a spatula each time until everything is smooth and even. A home blender won't get you quite the same fine crumb as Japan's rice flour, but you'll still end up with a delicious loaf with good texture. Check the batter on your spatula. It should feel smooth, not gritty, to the touch. Blending any further than that risks damaging the starch, so stop as soon as it's smooth. Once the batter is smooth, add the instant dry yeast last and mix it in gently. Adding the yeast last protects it from the blending heat, keeping fermentation conditions ideal. Pour the batter into the pan. This batter is looser than a typical wheat bread dough, so don't worry if it looks different from what you're used to. Use a spatula to scrape every last bit out of the blender and into the pan. Next, we let it ferment, creating the fine bubbles that give the bread its light, fluffy texture. Cover it loosely with plastic wrap, then let it rise in your oven's proofing setting at 95 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit until it's about 1.5 times its size. The time given is just a guide. Room and dough temperature affect how fast it rises, so judge by how much the dough has risen. Avoid over-fermenting. It can overflow the pan while baking, collapse afterward, or leave a coarser crumb. Once it's risen, cover and bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 40 to 45 minutes. Covering it helps the dough rise evenly, keeps it moist, and prevents over-browning. If you don't have a loaf pan, a pound cake pan works too. Just cover the batter with parchment paper, then foil and weigh it down with a heavy tray to act as a lid. If you'd like a deeper golden crust, remove the lid and bake for another 5 to 10 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it's done, take it out of the pan right away and let it cool on a wire rack. After it is cooled completely, slicing it will give you a clean, even cut. If you make this recipe, share it with us on Instagram. We'd love to see your bread, and it's a great way to share notes with fellow Japanese food lovers around the world. We'd love for you to try it plain first, but there are plenty of other ways to enjoy it too. First, try it toasted. Each bite layers crisp, fluffy, chewy, and moist all at once, a texture far more complex than your average slice of wheat bread. This bread also works beautifully in sandwiches, especially egg sandwiches. You'll find the recipe linked in the description. This bread also makes excellent French toast. It holds up well even after soaking up plenty of egg mixture without falling apart. One of our favorite Japanese-style twists. Try lightly toasting a slice, spreading it with butter, topping it with torn nori, and finishing with a few drops of soy sauce. Finally, let's talk about storage. If you're eating it within a day or two, room temperature storage works fine. Once it's just barely warm to the touch, wrap it tightly or place it in a storage bag to keep it from drying out. Since rice bread holds a lot of moisture, it can change texture quickly if it dries out. If you won't be eating it right away, we recommend freezing it. Once completely cool, slice it to your preferred thickness, wrap each slice individually, and place them in a freezer bag. Freezing helps retain moisture, keeping that soft, chewy texture close to fresh bake. When you're ready to eat it, toast it straight from frozen. No need to thaw first. For an even closer to fresh result, microwave it briefly to soften the inside, then toast to crisp up the surface. See you again in our next video, and don't forget to subscribe for more Japanese recipes.